Have you ever been in a meeting, you know the one, where a really bold new idea gets shot down by the old guard? They say something like, hey, let's not reinvent the wheel here. Well, it turns out, that moment, it isn't just about people being afraid of risk. It's actually about the very structure of our professional networks. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today. The surprising ways our connections can be both a launchpad for success and sometimes a cage for our biggest ideas.
And right here, this is the heart of the mystery we're tackling. This idea that the very social fabric that builds trust and helps us work together might also be this invisible barrier for truly game-changing innovation. How can both of those things be true at the same time? Well, that is the puzzle we are here to solve. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with a real-world story that just perfectly sets up this problem. Then we'll dig into a classic academic debate, and from there uncover a radical new answer from a huge 2025 study. We'll follow the data to its turning point, figure out why this happens, and then wrap up with a clear framework you can actually use to match your network to your goals.
Okay, so picture this. You're in a conference room. There are two teams, and they are at a total stalemate over a new drug compound. One team is seasoned, super tight-knit, they've been working together for ages. The other is this younger group, a bunch of fresh postdocs full of wild new energy. The older group wants to stick with what's worked before, but the younger team is just adamant they're on the verge of something huge, if they could just break the rules a little.
But here's the kicker, and this is the most important part. Their argument had almost nothing to do with the actual science. No, it was all about social dynamics. It was about who trusted who owed favors to who, and at the end of the day, who had the unspoken permission from the group to break the mold. And that right there sets the stage for everything we're about to uncover.
You know, this kind of conflict is nothing new. In fact, it taps into this debate that's been raging for decades among sociologists and innovation experts. For years, they've been going back and forth on one fundamental question. What kind of network is actually best for innovation? It's been this big, unsolved mystery, with two main schools of thought.
So on one side, you've got your fans of strong, cohesive networks. You know, think of a really close-knit lab where everybody knows each other, trusts each other. The argument is that this high trust and shared understanding makes executing on ideas incredibly fast and efficient. But then on the other side, you've got thinkers like Mark Granovetter and Ronald Burt. They argue for weak, sparse networks, where you're connected to lots of different, disconnected groups. The big benefit here? You get access to new, diverse information, basically the raw material for real imagination. So, what's better? Cohesion for getting things done or diversity for dreaming things up? For a long time, the answer was, well, it depends.
But what if both sides were right? What if the network you need depends entirely on the kind of idea you're pursuing? Now, that is the fresh perspective brought by a massive 2025 study from Jia Zhang and her colleagues. They basically said, hey, we've all been asking the wrong question. It's not about which network is better, it's about which network is better for what.
So first, they split innovation into two different flavors. The first one is what we call incremental innovation. This is all about making things better, refining a process, improving a product you already have. These ideas are super valuable, but they don't really rock the boat. They fit pretty comfortably into how things are already done.
And then you've got radical innovation. This is the disruptive stuff. This overturns everything. Think about the leap from a candle to a light bulb. Radical ideas don't just improve the old system, they often make the old system completely obsolete. And this distinction, as you're about to see, is a total game changer.
Now, to test this whole idea, the researchers didn't just run some small experiment. Oh no, they went massive. They analyzed who was collaborating with whom, what they were patenting, and, this is key, which of those patents were actually cited and built upon by other scientists. That's a really good way to measure an idea's real impact.
And the scale of their work was just incredible. I mean, look at this. Over 19,000 data points from 93 of the top pharma and biotech firms covering more than a decade of research. This wasn't a hunch, this was a conclusion drawn from an absolutely extraordinary data set, and what it pointed to was stunning.
And here it is. This is the turning point the data showed. For those incremental ideas, a strong, cohesive network was a huge plus. It led to about 20% more follow-on citations. The social glue worked like a charm. But for radical innovations, the effect completely flipped on its head. Those same tight-knit networks were linked with fewer follow-on citations. The very thing that helped the small ideas fly was actually grounding the big ones. Okay, so that leads us to the billion-dollar question. Why? Why does the same social glue that helps teams move fast suddenly turn into molasses when a really disruptive idea comes along? Well, the answer is hidden in the unwritten social rules that run these tight-knit groups.
See, in a cohesive group, there's this huge, unspoken pressure for reciprocity. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. There's an obligation to the group's harmony, to its established way of doing things. So when you champion a truly radical idea, you're not just suggesting something new, you're seen as rocking the boat. You might even be threatening your colleagues' expertise. And because everyone's getting their information from the same little bubble, there just isn't that outside perspective you need to see the genius in a disruptive idea.
This quote from the research paper just nails it. Radical innovation is, by definition, a deviation. It's a disruption. And in a network that's built on mutual support and stability, that kind of disruption gets subtly, or maybe not so subtly, punished. The group's instinct is to protect itself, even if it means killing a brilliant idea. So what does this all mean for those of us who are leading teams, managing research, or trying to innovate? Well, the data gives us a really powerful and actionable takeaway. The big insight here isn't that one type of network is good and the other is bad. It's that you have to be strategic. You have to be an architect. The solution is to match the network to the mission. Simple as that. If your goal is incremental improvement, making a process faster, making a product better, then lean into your strong, cohesive teams. Use that shared trust to move fast and get things done. But if you are hunting for that once-in-a-decade breakthrough, you have to actively protect the outliers. You've got to give them structural breathing room, encourage them to build connections outside the core group. That space is the oxygen that breakthrough ideas need to survive. And that brings us right back to where we started. Remember that young, frustrated team with the wild new drug compound? Well, they did eventually get their funding, but with one crucial catch. They were moved to a completely separate facility, totally shielded from the social pressures and the influence of the main group. And guess what? 2 years later, their spin-off was so successful that the parent company acquired it. That distance, which might have seemed like a punishment, was actually the secret ingredient to their breakthrough.
So, the final question I'll leave you with is this. When you look at your own teams, your own organization, your own collaborations, is the network you've built a launchpad for your best ideas? Or has all that social glue somehow hardened into a cage? The answer to that question could be what determines your next big breakthrough.